COVID-19 protests threaten border trade between Canada-US. Canadian lawmakers are expressing increasing worry about the economic effects of disruptive COVID-19 demonstrations. 3:43. Ottawa, Ontario, Canadian lawmakers expressed increasing worry Tuesday about the economic effects of disruptive demonstrations after the busiest border crossing between the U.S. and Canada became partially blocked by truckers protesting vaccine mandates and other COVID-19 restrictions. The blockade at the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, prevented traffic from entering Canada while some U.S.-bound traffic was still moving. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino said, calling the bridge one of the most important border crossings in the world. It carries 25% of all trade between Canada and the United States. Canadian Transport Minister Omar Alghabra said such blockades will have serious implications on the economy and supply chains. I've already heard from automakers and food grocers. This is really a serious cause for concern, he said in Ottawa, the capital. Added Mendicino. Most Canadians understand there is a difference between being tired and fatigued with the pandemic and crossing into some other universe. Speaking in an emergency debate late Monday in Parliament, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the protesters are trying to blockade our economy, our democracy, and it has to. The daily demonstrations staged by the so-called Freedom Truck Convoy began in Ottawa, where demonstrators have used hundreds of parked trucks to paralyze parts off the capital for more than 10 days. The protests have infuriated people who live around downtown, including neighborhoods near Parliament Hill, the seat of the federal government. Dave Weatherall, a federal civil servant, lives near the truckers' prime staging area in a city-owned parking lot outside of the downtown core. They're using the lot to terrorize people in Centertown, he said, asking why the city has allowed the convoy to remain parked on its property for free and without. It's the first time since having kids that I've seriously wondered about the world we brought them into. I always figured they could handle most things the world will throw at them, but this feels different, he said. Demonstrations have spread to locations on or near the Canadian border, including the Ambassador Bridge, where a protest caused long backups and at one point stopped traffic in both directions. The bridge remains blocked on the road to Canada. At a news conference after Trudeau spoke, trucker spokesman Tom Marazzo reiterated that the protesters want to overthrow the government. Marazzo said he is willing to meet with the opposition parties and the nation's Governor-General, the representative of Britain's Queen Elizabeth II as head of state. All three opposition parties technically could join together and defeat the government because Trudeau does not have the majority of seats in Parliament, but that is highly unlikely because the vast majority of lawmakers have condemned the protests. Protesters have also closed another important U.S.-Canada border crossing in Coutts, Alberta. The border at Coutts continues to open and close at the discretion of a group of protesters who believe they are above the law. It has to stop, tweeted Rachel Notley, Alberta's former premier and current opposition New Democrat leader. Protesters have said they will not leave until all vaccine mandates and COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. They also called for the removal of Trudeau's government, though it is responsible for few of the restrictive measures, most of which were put in place by provincial governments. François Laporte, the president of Teamsters Canada, which represents over 55,000 drivers, including 15,000 long-haul truck drivers, said the protests do not represent the industry in which 90% of drivers are vaccinated. The Freedom Convoy and the despicable display of hate led by the political right and shamefully encouraged by elected Conservative politicians does not reflect the values of Teamsters Canada, nor the vast majority of our members, and in fact has served to delegitimize the real concerns of most truck drivers. Today, Laporte said in a statement. Joel Lightbound, a lawmaker for Trudeau's Liberal Party, rebuked his leader Tuesday for dividing Canadians and said his government needs to create a roadmap for when coronavirus measures should be lifted. It is time we stop dividing people, to stop pitting one part of the population against each other, Lightbound said. I can't help but notice that But the tone and actions of my government changed drastically on the eve and during the last election campaign. From a positive and unifying approach, a decision was made to wedge, to divide and to stigmatize. Trudeau continues to take a hard line against the protesters. The Prime Minister said during Monday's Parliament debate that everyone is tired of COVID-19, and that the restrictions will not last forever. He noted that Canada has one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. Meanwhile, the Canadian province of Saskatchewan became the first in the country to announce a plan to lift all COVID-19 restrictions. Saskatchewan officials said they will no longer require COVID-19 vaccine passports starting Monday. The province, with a population of almost 1.2 million people, is also ending its indoor mask mandate at the end of the month. Conservative Premier Scott Moe said the benefits of providing proof of vaccination to enter businesses such as restaurants no longer outweigh the cost. He said the passport has created deep divisions in the province. In Alberta, another conservative stronghold, the Premier planned later Tuesday to announce a careful and prudent plan to lift damaging restrictions if pressure in our hospitals continues to decline. The Quebec government said most COVID-19 restrictions would be lifted across the province by March 14, except for mask mandates and the vaccine passport. Premier François Legault announced that all limits on indoor private gatherings will be removed Saturday. Entertainment and sports venues can open at 50% capacity by February 21 and then return to full capacity on February 28. Bars and casinos will reopen as of February 28 at half capacity and increase to full capacity by Gillies reported from Toronto.